Shush, let's sing together.
Christ is my reward, and all of my Only for you, and I will sing. darkness tremble in your holy light. In every hour see Jesus our God, great and mighty to be praised. God of all days, you're glorious in all of your ways. Your majesty, the wonder and grace in the light of your name. So let hope rise, darkness tremble in your holy light. In every hour see Jesus our God, great and mighty to be praised. So let hope rise, darkness tremble in your holy light. And every hour see Jesus our God, great and mighty to be praised. With everything, we will shout for your glory. With everything, we will shout for your praise. With everything, we will shout for your glory. With everything, we will shout for your praise. Our hearts they cry, be glorified, be lifted high above all names. For you are King. With everything, we will shout for your praise.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us this Sunday. Here are this week's announcements. A reminder that you can continue to support the ministries and staff of LCC through offering. You can give your offering via e-transfer through your banking app or website. To find out more information, visit LighthouseYYC.ca/give to find out how. Join us for our Yam Canada Day picnic and spikeball tournament in person this Wednesday. The tournament will be at Bonas Park at 6 p.m. Please bring food and drinks along with lawn or camping chairs with you. Please reach out to Eli Fan if you have any questions. Due to the Yam picnic, we won't be having our usual drop-in dinner, but we will still be having it on Monday at 6:30 p.m. Stop by, bring your dinner, and catch up with your church community. The link to the meeting will always be posted in the Yam and DG WhatsApp group chats. If you don't have WhatsApp, please contact one of our pastors or leaders to get the link. The Children's Ministry is looking for volunteers to pack and deliver crafts, kits for Kids Club, and Sunday School. These kits will help our online lessons be more fun and memorable for the children. Volunteers, please meet at church on July 13th at 7:30 p.m. If you are available to pack or deliver boxes, please contact Pastor Enoch. The COVID-19 pandemic has impacted many of us over the last few weeks. If you are struggling during this time, please let our pastors or leaders know. We want to pray for you and assist you in any practical way. If you have not yet voted in this year's board elections, you only have a few minutes to do so. The voting window closes at 12 p.m. today, June 28th. The results of the election will be posted on our social media channels later this week and on our live stream next Sunday. If you have any questions or comments about our church events or ministries, we'd like to hear from you either through email at info@LighthouseYYC.ca or through Instagram. You can also connect with us in the week on our Facebook page or on our YouTube channel. Our service continues with Pastor Enoch's message coming up next.
Good morning, LCC family. It's Pauline. It's been a month now since baby Pascal joined our family. Thank you for all your well wishes and support. We're doing great at home. We miss you, and we hope to introduce Pascal to you in person when we meet again. Love, the Chee family.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us again. Hope you all had a good week. Mine was pretty normal. I'm just work and family. Can't complain, I love it both. Sometimes when I'm alone, my mind drifts to important days in my past. I think sometimes about the day I got married, for example. That was a great day. I know I'm supposed to say that, but it really was good. There was just one point in the day though that it almost went really bad. So it was right towards the beginning of the ceremony, right when we were about to begin, and all the guests were gathered, and the music was playing, and the wedding party was off in a side room, all getting ready, and we were pretty much good to go. And I looked at Pauline in her dress, and it looked good, except I thought to myself, something's wrong with this dress. You have to understand, I am not one for fashion. I don't care about fashion. Literally today, I went out with Edna to the park, and I went with my summer shorts, my winter sweater, and my dress shoes. And I thought to myself, someone might care about this, but I do not care. So I just went out anyway because it was functional. And in my mind, there's basically only two kinds of clothing out there. There's functional clothing and there's non-functional clothing. And that day on my wedding day, I looked at the dress, and it was like I had spent my whole life training for this. It's like, this dress is not functional because the front part was too long. See, it was long enough to touch the ground, and then afterwards, I had about 4 inches of fabric left over. And what this would mean is that she'd be fine if she was just standing still, and she'd look great. But if she took one step forward, she'd be stepping on her dress. And then a second step forward, and she'd be tripping. And I realized that. I was like, hey guys, there's a problem with the dress. And I got the whole wedding party involved, and we all scrambled around and looked for some safety pins, and we pinned up her dress. It wasn't ideal because we had to fold it up, and it made the front part really heavy, but at least the dress was functional. And we had no more time to do anything else, so off we went. Went into the sanctuary, and Pauline walked the aisle, and she was just kicking her dress like this. That was the way she did her wedding entrance. Anytime she had to move throughout the wedding, she had to go like this, kicking her legs to sign the registry and get back to the front. But we made it. We made it through the ceremony, and afterwards, pressure was off. We were just shaking hands with people, talking with them. It was good. And just off to the side, we saw a little girl kicking her dress. Because apparently that's what brides are supposed to do now. And we had influenced her. We taught her wrong. But I'm actually really curious to see if one day she's going to do that at her own wedding. I want an invite to that girl's wedding. I want to see. I share this story because I want to introduce our topic for today. Our topic is leadership. And you might be thinking, how does this topic of dresses and weddings have to do with leadership? Well, actually, this story has two examples of leadership in it. The first is what I call leading from the back, where I spotted a problem. I said, hey guys, let's do something about this. We scrambled around and we fixed it out of sight. Nobody really knew about it. The second kind of leadership came from Pauline as she walked with her dress and she influenced another person to do the same. And that's what leadership is, in essence. Leadership is just influence. Which means, as Christians, we are meant to lead. Because as Christians, God has put us on earth to be influential. Jesus calls us salt and light for the world. And just as a little bit of salt changes the flavor of a whole meal, and just as a little bit of light changes the look of a whole room if it's dark, so a little bit of Christian presence changes everything in our environment. We're meant to be influential. The only question is, how? And for that, we go to our Bible story. We're continuing in our story of the book of Esther, and it's a great story. It feels like a Hollywood movie sometimes. There's this evil villain. His name is Haman, and he's the second most powerful guy in the Persian Empire. And he's got this plot to kill Mordecai, who's Esther's cousin. And he wants to kill Mordecai because Mordecai had refused to bow down to him, and Haman's got this raging ego. But Haman doesn't just want to kill Mordecai, but he also wants to kill all of Mordecai's people. And Haman can do that because he's so powerful in the government. And so Haman went to the king. He and the king passed a law to do a genocide of all the Jewish people. The date was set. Now death was hanging over the heads of all of God's people. But in a turn of events, in our last week's sermon, we learned that Esther was able to get rid of Haman, and Haman was killed off, and Mordecai was actually exalted to the highest place, to Haman's place. And so now Mordecai was the second most powerful person in the Persian Empire, and things were good for Esther and Mordecai and their family and their friends. But still, this law that Haman made was hanging in the air. The law was something that they had to really reckon with because it was the kind of law that could not be canceled. And Esther and Mordecai had to save the day with their leadership. That leads me to our first reading today. It's from Esther chapter 8, starting at verse 3. It says, Esther again pleaded with the king, falling at his feet and weeping. She begged him to put an end to the evil plan of Haman the Agagite, which he had devised against the Jews. Then the king extended the gold scepter to Esther, and she arose and stood before him. If it pleases the king, she said, and if he regards me with favor and thinks it is the right thing to do, and if he is pleased with me, let an order be written overruling the dispatches that Haman, son of Hammedatha the Agagite, devised and wrote to destroy the Jews in all the king's provinces. For how can I bear to see the disaster fall on my people? How can I bear to see the destruction of my family? We find our first key to great leadership in this passage that I just read. The first key to great leadership is a hurting heart. A hurting heart. You have to understand something about Esther. Esther was safe. She was probably the wealthiest and most powerful woman in the world at that time. And she could do anything she wanted for her friends and her family. She could keep them safe. They could live in luxury for the rest of their lives. They were set. But Esther's heart did not allow her to rest easy. Her heart was hurting because she could not bear the thought of God's people being killed off. And so she decided she'd risk it all. She'd go to the king. She'd beg for their lives. So she went in, interrupted his day, broke the law because the law said people can only approach the king if given an invitation, and anybody who does not have an invitation will be killed. There's a death penalty for doing what Esther did. But she went in anyway because of the urgency of the situation. She pleaded for the life of her people. And for a moment, it was not clear whether she would live or die. And then King Xerxes extended his golden scepter as a sign that she would live. And Esther talked to the king and persuaded him to do something to give her people a chance to live again. And the king listened. What a woman. What a hero. Someone who risked her life like that. And the Bible tells us to honor people like this. Philippians chapter 2, honor people, those who give their lives, who risk their lives to do God's work. Take them seriously. Hold them up as examples. Learn from them. Respect them. Because these are the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. These are the people who win in life. God works in all things for their good. These will be the happiest people in the end. And the first and most important quality that Esther had as a leader was a hurting heart. She loved people so much that her heart hurt. And she refused to sit back and enjoy life because she'd rather risk everything for a chance to make a difference. You know, it's important for Christians to learn from Esther because actually we're a lot like Esther, more than meets the eye at first. The Bible tells us that we as Christians are royalty. We are sons and daughters of the King of Kings. We are secure. We are privileged. We are loved. And because of our position, we are tempted as a result to cling on to everything that we have, to not take risks. And as modern Christians, we are tempted to say, it's not our fault that the world is like this. It's not our fault that the world is broken and full of injustice and people are going to an eternity without God. We didn't cause this problem. And besides, it's not clear what difference we could make, even if we tried. The world seems so set in its ways. People don't want to hear about Jesus. And so as Christians, we have many excellent reasons to play it safe and sit back and count our blessings and not proselytize. Just take care of our own family and friends. But some of us will have a heart like Esther. Some of us will refuse to have an easy life because our heart is in pain, and it will make it so that we will not be able to rest. Because we see our country as a spiritual war zone, countless people are headed towards an end that we would not want them to have. The thought of this devastation around us will make us miserable to the point that we cannot but do something about it. The Bible tells us that people like that are happiest in the end. People like Esther who actually step out and risk it all. The Bible tells us these are the people. There's no other way to live than to give your life away. But the question remains, what if you don't feel this passion in your heart like Esther did? What if you don't feel this pain? Well, maybe a story will help. I mentioned this one time before, but I went to Brazil years ago. I was part of a missions team of engineers and architects and other technical people, and we were going to Brazil to design an orphanage. And our contact in Brazil, his name was Leshu. He was a great guy, passionate man, loved people. He was going to be the orphanage director. And we were really looking forward to meeting him and working with him in Brazil. And then one day he just disappeared on us. We couldn't contact him. We couldn't phone him, couldn't email him, just disappeared. And after a couple months, we got an email from him, and he told us, sorry, he's been out of contact because he had almost died because he had caught dengue fever. And so we made a mental note in our heads that we have to be careful, that dengue fever is a really important thing. And we found out that dengue fever in Brazil is carried by mosquitoes. And so we had to be really careful about mosquitoes. So off we went to Brazil, their big team, North America. We'd go off to this site, these big fields, and sometimes they had mosquitoes, but I would go out, and even though it was really hot, I'd wear these long pants to cover my legs, and I'd stuff my legs into my socks, and my team members would look at me. They'd be like, yeah, this guy's not getting any dengue fever today. Well, yeah, I'm not trying to impress any girls, just trying to get out of here alive. One day, there's a mosquito that flew near our group. And he landed on one of the guys. And his wife saw it, and she was a few feet away, and she went up to him, and she said, dengue, 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 slap! She killed the mosquito on him. And that was okay. And we all laughed about it because we all knew there was an urgency about these mosquitoes, that these are not just little bugs that will make you itchy. A dengue fever mosquito is like flying death. We had to take them seriously. And our whole group did that. And I share this story because it's an example of how a heart attitude can change when we know something. When we know a dengue fever mosquito is not just something that will make you a little itchy, but it actually has huge consequences. And similarly, with the Christian life, when we know certain things are important, it changes our attitude and our emotions. The Bible tells us in Romans chapter 12 that we are transformed by the renewing of our mind. It means we are transformed as we think straight. And as we think straight, we can test and approve of what God's will is. We'll find it to be good, pleasing, and perfect if we take the time to straighten out our thoughts, to make sure our thoughts are good and accurate and healthy. That's how we develop this love and passion in our heart, by working on our minds. And so I want to encourage you, when when you listen to sermons, when you go to Bible studies, when you do your devos. Not to just be passive when you do these things, not just to wait for something to jump out at you and impress you, but rather be proactive. Go in aggressively. Go in looking for answers. Ask yourself, what is the risk? What is the reward? What is the cost of doing nothing? How do I know all this stuff is true? Come in with your questions so that you may know why you are committing your life to this stuff. It's people like that who understand. They can develop passion. And as we live with these truths and we carry them day to day, they become ingrained in us. They become intuitive. We develop a feel for these things. And as we walk with like-minded people, we take care of each other until we all develop this heart that is in sync with God, that feels the things that God feels, that hurts with Him. These are the people who are blessed. The first key to great leadership is a hurting heart. Second key to great leadership is a multiplying mind. Let's go back to our passage. Starting at verse 9. It says, "At once the royal secretaries were summoned on the 23rd day of the 3rd month, the month of Shivan. They wrote out all Mordecai's orders to the Jews and to the satraps, governors, and nobles of the 127 provinces stretching from India to Kush. These orders were written in the script of each province and the language of each people, and also to the Jews in their own script and language. Mordecai wrote in the name of King Xerxes, sealed the dispatches with the king's signet ring, and sent them by mounted couriers who rode fast horses, especially bred for the king. The king's edict granted the Jews in every city the right to assemble and protect themselves, to destroy, kill, and annihilate the armed men of any nationality or province who might attack them." And it goes on. These verses tell us how Mordecai and Esther made their difference. It wasn't just with a good heart and good intention. They actually needed strategy. They needed efficiency. They needed to empower people. See, Mordecai and Esther, they didn't have an army of their own. They couldn't go around protecting God's people by themselves. But they did something that was arguably just as good, perhaps even better. They empowered God's people to make a difference. They made it possible for tens of thousands of people to defend their own families with support from the government, as it turns out. And Esther and Mordecai's part in all of this was to draft up a plan, work with the government, work with the scribes and the translators, get the message out on time. And it seems so tedious and dry sometimes to do this kind of administrative stuff, but this is the stuff that empowers people. Leaders like that, who are willing to do that kind of stuff, get amazing results. Recently, I've been watching a YouTube channel. It's this guy named Jacob Collier. Jacob is in the conversation for most talented musician in the world, and he is quite something else. Like, sometimes I think I'm talented, and then I watch this guy and I'm like, man, next to him, I'm like a chimpanzee in the zoo just banging a stick on the ground or something, because like, I'm just not talented compared to this guy. He's really good. I like to watch him. And he puts on concerts, and they're your typical concert in some sense, where he plays an instrument and people say wow and they enjoy it that way. But there's this special part of each concert where he puts his instrument aside, and he actually puts aside all of his musical stuff, and he engages the crowd. He talks to the different sections of the crowd, and he says, okay, you sing this note, ah, and this note, this section over here, you sing this note, ah, and he moves them like louder and softer and higher and lower in their pitch. He gets them to harmonize with each other. He gets them to clap their hands and stamp their feet in a certain way. And this crowd realizes that they are making the music. They are the musicians. They're making this most beautiful music that they've ever heard. And they are the ones doing it. There's something about that, something powerful, something transcendent about that. It's so much better than just sitting back and being passive and saying somebody else is good. And I bring up this example of Jacob Collier because this is God's plan for us in leadership. It's to empower people like that. Ephesians chapter 4 tells us that God has given leaders to the church to equip God's people for works of service so that the body of Christ can each part do its work and build itself all up. One of the great things about this church, and one of my very favorite parts of the church, is this culture of empowerment, where our leaders are actively looking to create important, meaningful work for people. And so in previous years, we've been working on the teens, and the teens are now everywhere in the church, and they carry our church. They do the sound booth, and they do the stuff up front with the worship teams, and they do children's ministry. They're on the board. They do everything. They're great. And recently, we've had children and tweens up doing our worship ministry. And this weekend, we have, for our first time, somebody in Sunday school who's a kid. He's a student, and he's teaching a Sunday school lesson with support from the adults. And this is not just some stunt that we're doing to say, look at us, we can do stuff with young people, but rather, this is the way that church is supposed to be done. We're supposed to be empowering each person to make their difference. We're all supposed to get involved, not only in service, but also in empowering. So you might not see yourself as a leader, but actually there's different ways to lead, and one of them will fit you. Some people will lead from the front like me, and you have to stand in front of a lot of people and say stuff that makes sense, hopefully. You'll have to lead them by example. Other people will lead more from the back with support things. People in the tech ministry or the treasury ministry or the board. People who donate. There's all kinds of support ministries that are mostly out of sight, but that are so important, that empower other people. And they are a form of leadership as well. And then there are those who lead from the side, by example, by having conversations, relating to people, encouraging people. And that is a form of leadership as well. And each of these ways empowers other people to make a difference, empowers them to be strong. That is God's plan. That is how we make our mark on history. Experience the promises of God. I'll conclude by summarizing everything I've said, and then I'll pray for us. So in conclusion, a great leader has two traits: a hurting heart and a multiplying mind. And Esther shows us what these traits are about. With a hurting heart, it means we cannot sit back. We cannot bear to sit back in our comfort and our safety while other people are hurting, while the world is just floundering without God. And a hurting heart will push us towards action. And we develop a heart like that by taking the time to straighten out our thoughts, by being intentional with the formation of our Christian ideas, by asking the hard questions, by driving towards answers. So I want to encourage you to take the formation of your mind seriously, to be very intentional about the development of your Christian thoughts. And secondly, there is the multiplying mind, to be efficient and practical. We empower people from the front, from the back, from the side. We lead people in whatever way we can. And if we do that, we are following God's plan for our leadership. And the end result of all this will be joy. Let's pray to close. God, what a bold plan that you've given to us. How difficult it is and how costly it is. But of course, you have gone before us with an even bolder plan to give your life for us. Winning our trust so that we may follow you and know that we will be blessed. Help us to follow you for your glory and for our joy. Amen. We'll end with the Lord's Prayer. Can you please repeat it with me? It goes like this: Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we also have forgiven our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. For yours is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Go in peace.